Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. So we are continuing on with our tier list. This time we are in the Can Be Ignored tier, and we're starting off with Karma. So if you don't know, Set Karma is an exceptionally competitive deck, and I put Set at the top of S tier because he is the better part of that deck equation. I do think Karma on her own, without a proper cash out mechanic, is actually not very good. So obviously coins were a big buff to Karma, allowing you to essentially duplicate infinite mana, which is very strong. But again, if you don't have the cash out, like Ezreal, which we put in B tier, or Set, which we put in S tier, if you don't have those proper cash out mechanics for Karma, she essentially doesn't do anything on her own. So again, I tend to think like, okay, well the coin package is good, that's Set's territory. The burn package is good, that's Ezreal's territory. Karma is just the combo enabler. And for that reason I can't place her any higher because she doesn't really do anything on her own. And therefore she can be ignored. And again, you don't have to agree with my logic on that, but that's just, I'm explaining kind of how I came to that conclusion. Because again, Karma is in one of the most competitive decks in the game, but I think that without the other champions to carry her, she's not very good. Next up is Renekton. I think Renekton can be ignored. Renekton currently doesn't have a single deck that he is competitive in, so I think we can be pretty safe with the C tier placement here. But again, he has mechanics. He has a card that essentially allows him to deal double damage, I believe, in Shurima. I think it's 3 mana in Shurima, and it's like a combo piece that people have tried with Renekton to make him viable. Which again, you can experiment with that and try to bring that back. If I can even find the card currently, which I don't. There it is, Curse of the Tomb. So Curse of the Tomb. Give a unit, I take double damage, and if I would die, obliterate me this round. But again, it is a tool for essentially bursting out extra damage. Lee Sin is next up, so I think Lee Sin can safely be ignored. Unfortunately, Lee Sin has just been kind of overshadowed by Set in terms of what it wants to do. Set Karma being the kind of big Ionia combo deck, and then Rise being the other big Ionia combo deck. It doesn't really leave any room for Lee Sin OTK, and so currently there are no competitive Lee Sin decks. You could try to run Akshan Lee Sin, but at the end of the day, you'd probably rather just like mana duplicate coins with Karma and then just do dumb stuff most of the time. So again, Set being just better than Lee Sin in almost every circumstance. Then we have Asol. So again, I've been very fair with this champ ranking. Like Asol is like one of my favorite champions in the game. But I have to be fair and say that Asol basically has one deck where you should run him for the level up, and that is essentially using his big ramp condition to tutor out 2 10-10 champions, and then he insta-flips off that play. That is really the one trick that Asol has up his sleeve. So yeah, you just you pay 12 mana, tutor out 2 10-mana champions, and then he insta-flips, and then all your Celestials cards are free, and he prints infinite value. That's just one trick, and it is fun and powerful, and again, I would say that, like, it can be like a diamond level deck, and that's the true balance of LOR. That like everything is okay, nothing is like terrible, but you have to say, like, if I was to say what's better, Asol or Set, Set's gonna be better than Asol pretty much every single time. Next up we have Braum, my boy Braum. So again, Braum is relegated to anti-aggro tech. He does that very well, but he doesn't do anything more than being anti-aggro tech. So if your opponent, a lot of people who are sick of Azir Aurelia will tech in the Braum, and then Braum will just get run over anyway, because if you're like me, you're running the optimal version with Emperor's Army, and your tokens are massive, so not even Braum can stop them. So it does place him in somewhat of a difficult situation, where he's anti-aggro tech, he's a Vlad enabler, but he's not necessarily, you're not scared if he levels up. You can basically ignore him most of the time. Then we have Vlad, speaking of. So again, Vlad was buffed to essentially be a removal tool now, and that's very good for Vlad. I talked earlier about how all the champions, the core champions that were updated, are better, right? So Vlad's like almost B tier, but I keep him in C tier just because, you know, he doesn't quite get there most of the time, I find. Again, maybe you'll really have fun with that one Freljord Noxus deck that is playable with Braum and Vladimir. I played it enough times to be like, the deck has some issues. Then we have Darius. Again, Darius being, you know, a fun card, again, buffed. Like, again, all these vanilla champions were buffed. They made him a 10-7. He is a big boy. Like, it doesn't get much bigger than Darius. The way you want to do it is set up all your Overwhelm units and then put Darius on the right of the attack order. And that way, even if your Overwhelm units are hitting and pushing your opponent below 10 HP, then Darius will flip mid-attack, and then you'll get the extra damage in. So, again, Darius is not terrible. I played around with meme Darius, and he can do some work in select circumstances. But again, it's a very competitive listing, right, in terms of what cards can and can't do. Next up, we have Echo. So again, Echo's not bad. He basically has one deck, which is, you know, Turbo Echo. I'm so used to thinking he's a Shuriman card because, like, that's his one deck. But yeah, he's actually a PNZ card. And yeah, Echo is okay in that one Shuriman predict deck where you sort of turbo out Echo leveled, so he's always coming down as a 5/3, which is acceptable stat line. And then he swings, he gets to you know, print free time tricks, and then he gets to hopefully predict into a Chrono Break. But the high variance nature of the deck, including things like Cat Gem, people love to play like duplicate Cat Gem and stuff, and like, yeah, it can be, much like Rise, can feel very competitive when it happens and when it works and when it clicks, and when it doesn't, it feels like you're playing nothing at all. Which is the nature of a can be ignored C tier card. Then we have War. War. So yeah, we have Ornn and Scion. Let's hit these two at once. So Ornn is currently winning about 45% of games in Eternal in Jax Ornn. And the reason for that is, again, he is so vulnerable to specific forms of removal. Again, you can bounce him, you can vengeance him, and then he just won't get the attack with the big, you know, Spirit of the Ram. And that makes the deck fragile. So again, when an aggressive deck, like if Rise wins 45% of games, it's fine. It's a high variance combo deck, of course, and it's hard to pilot, and it has really bad matchups. So of course it's not going to win a lot of games. When an aggressive mid-range deck is only winning 45% of games, that's bad. That's just like flat out C tier card, like it's not doing well. So again, look at the deck stats if you want. The win rate for Jax Ornn is currently 45%. Math doesn't lie. Next up, we have Jack. So again, Jack's a fun card. He has a really cool kit. Again, we talked about earlier how powerful coins are. Coins are exceptionally powerful, and as long as you have any sort of method to duplicate them, you can duplicate them with Seraphine, you can duplicate them with Karma, get double mana, and you basically get a full mana refill, which is very, very powerful. And then he even has a story card that is kind of unique to him. He has a boat that's unique to him. So again, he has all these cool things, but it's just so far nobody's really figured out like what that one Jack deck is that's better than all the other Jack decks. No one's really keyed into that yet, and for that reason he remains in C tier. Coming up next, Thalia. So again, Thalia's, you know, again, one of my favorite cards. You know, I'm not picking cards that, I'm not showing favoritism here. Like, I love Thalia, I love mid-range Shurima. You could even, you know, put Overwhelm on her, and then she pings with the rocks, and then she swings with Overwhelm, and like, all of that's good stuff. There are no such thing as like bad champions in LOR. There's just like less competitive champions. Because again, she has to swing for value most of the time. That's just how it goes. But you can also use her in like thralls and that sort of thing. So lots of flexibility with Thalia. Next up, we have Fiora. Fiora was actually buffed. And I think that, like, talking about cards that I think their ranking might change. I do think it is Fiora. And the reason for that is because they printed more champ tutors, right? So before, you would run like Fiora, and then you could run like 3 Entreats, or you could run the Shuriman card, 1 mana to tutor out a champion. Well, now you can run the 1 mana tutor in Shurima, and you can run the 3 mana tutor in Shurima, and that means that you're always drawing Fiora almost 100% of the time. And I'm a big fan of like consistent Fiora decks. So again, Fiora might be better now with the release of the new card. That being said, until I see that deck where Fiora is absolutely destroying everyone, I'm going to keep her in C tier or can be ignored. Then we have Xerath. Xerath is pretty relegated to Sundisk, right? So Xerath pretty much very rarely gets played outside of Sundisk. And yes, you know, the people who are good at Sundisk are very good at Sundisk. It's just like I'm good at Rise, so I'm like pretty above average at Rise. People who are good at Sundisk are above average at Sundisk. And in those instances, it can feel pretty scary. But again, win rate wise, it's still on the lower end of the scale. And also the lack of flexibility in Xerath is somewhat problematic, where it's like basically Ascended Xerath or nothing at all most of the time. Then we have, you know, Senna, right? Senna and let me see if I have Vigar here as well. Yeah, I have Senna and Vigar. We'll take them together. Senna and Vigar are both in the same tier of can be ignored. It's just that there are a lot of really good control cards in LOR, and more keep getting printed, right? So this set we got a new stun card that makes Ionia better, which helps Rise and helps Yasuo. But then you look at like core Darkness decks, and nothing about what Darkness does has changed or updated at all over time. So it's a lot of work to make Darkness good. And it's your combos can be kind of disassembled quite a bit, like your pieces. If the 2 mana card comes down, it can get Mystic Shotted, and then you're not getting the Darkness buff. Vigar comes down, he gets killed, you're not getting the Darkness buff. Things like that make the deck feel a little fragile, and for that reason, I have to keep him on the lower end of the spectrum. But I like Darkness. I love Darkness, no complaints there. Then we have Rumble. So again, I know Draven Rumble is one of the best decks in Eternal. I've already rated Draven fairly highly. I believe I put him in A tier. Yes, and Draven's the better part of the package, right? Draven sort of getting you that infinite card advantage, and then all Rumble has to do is kind of discard all the card advantage that Draven generates for him. So in that case, Rumble feels a little one note. You're going all in on the spell shield, and then you're kind of like, okay, here's my Rumble, and then can you remove the spell shield and deal with the Rumble, or can you not? And so it's very hard for me to place this champion higher. Like, I think he's better than Ornn, right? So if Ornn is like a 7-mana champion that you're all in on the commitment, and he gets answered, and you just lose 45% of games, Rumble is 4 mana, is similar to Ornn in the sense that he is, you know, kind of a hard to deal with big dude on the mana curve that he's coming down, but he has spell shield. He's like a better Sivir, right? So again, it turns out that if Sivir's like, you know, B tier, again, it's just tough for me to it's just a personal bias thing. I'll fully admit that Rumble's probably like a solid B tier. If Sivir's B tier, then Rumble's B tier, but I just like Sivir better as a card. Then we have Aatrox. Yeah, not everything is like firmly planted in science when it comes to these tier lists. There's always going to be a little bit of personal opinion, but yeah, and then you're going to be seeing a lot of like Runeterra region stuff. So Aatrox, I think Aatrox is pretty meh. I actually like playing Kayn Aatrox sometimes, and I think it's a very fun and well-designed archetype and deck, and very balanced. But again, it has some weaknesses, right? It has this grab bag of things where it's like, okay, well, you can run the 2-mana ping, which you probably should. You can run the harsh winds, which you probably should. And then you run the core package, and you hope you don't overdraw on equipment, and you also hope that it's not the opposite, and you underdraw on equipment, and so that can make the deck feel a little loosey-goosey. But that's it. Like, again, it's not a meta deck in Eternal. So in terms of stats, I don't really have to justify this pick. Then we have Lux Illuminated. So again, Lux Illuminated is just fine. She's just fine. you know, again, she's not as bad. Like she's sitting alongside like a lot of really decent champs, right? Like if I'm saying that Lux Illuminated is like on the same power scaling as like a Zillion, which we'll cover next, like that's pretty good, right? If she's as good as Kayn, she's a perfectly well-designed, sort of middle-of-the-road C-tier champion. Nothing to really complain about there. Not every champion on release has to be like broken, because it gets a little crazy. Then we have Lysandra. So again, Thralls is tough. So in the new expansion, I have played around with Thundersong, which is like the new Thralls card, and I just didn't feel like it was helping Thralls do what it wants to do enough. So like, for example, if you play Thundersong on the 5 mana card, it creates a countdown with a 5-turn countdown for a 5 mana card, which feels a little, even with like running all the landmark acceleration you can, that feels a little slow in a Thralls deck. So maybe Thundersong is just waiting to be in a different deck entirely and not Lysandra, but otherwise you just run Thralls normally, and it's just a Thralls deck, and pretty C-tier stuff. Then we have Volibear. Lots of people love to run Volley, but then they never play Volley, and that's a bad sign, right? So every single person I see running Eddie Volley never plays the Volley. Really, really, really bad sign. So they're like hard mulling out the Volley every single game. That's what that means. They're just, of course, a lot of people play that way in general. Like standard players, they'll just hard mull out champions like every single game, and it's like, well, then why are you playing that deck? It's not always the right strategy. But yeah, Volibear never coming down and definitely never leveling is a bad sign. Because again, Eddie just is so much easier because Eddie doesn't require you to play for any sort of win con, right? Eddie is just Eddie. Just brain dead Eddie stuff. Volibear is like the well-designed version of Eddie, where he has this really cool skill proc when he comes down, a really cool level up. Really well-designed card, but it just turns out that like well-designed versus poorly designed, and poorly designed wins. Then we have, I assume, do we have Quinn here? Yeah, you know, we'll hit up Quinn as well. It might be missing. No, we have Quinn's here. So Quinn and Heimer, both in C tier. Scouts, again, not being an amazing archetype. I think I would rather be on like Tarek Poppy than Scouts in terms of like double attack decks, or I'd rather be on the upgraded Azir Aurelia than Scouts. But Scouts is fine, right? It's just that Demacia has a lot of competition for top decks. Like if you're in Demacia, why are you not playing like Eddie mid-range, you know, tempo Demacia junk like card pile? Why would you play Scouts over that? Unfortunately, that's the way it is right now. Eddie is just kind of like overshadowing a lot of other cool archetypes and decks in Demacia, because Eddie is like just like Freljord Eddie deck, Demacia Eddie deck, and it overshadows Ramp, and it overshadows other mid-range Demacia decks, and yeah, it's very unhealthy, unfortunately. And so while Eddie remains this way, I can't really rank these other cards higher. But if Eddie gets changed, absolutely, Scouts will be fine. And Heimer. So again, Heimer being one of the cooler cards in the game. And Vi. So again, Heimer and Vi kind of sitting in C tier. The way the turrets work is very awesome. I love turrets. I love Heimer. But it's just like there's so many effective ways to generate infinite jumpers in every single archetype that running a champion that generates infinite jumpers seems a little unnecessary. Similarly with Vi, where Vi is just kind of a big challenger girl. I do think she's better than Thresh. So like Thresh Nasus, I think Vi is the better card. So I've actually played around with like Shadow Isles, Ezreal, Vi, and it actually feels pretty okay in these, you know, specific situations, specific matchups. Then we have Zill. So again, I kind of talked about it a bit with my review of Echo, but again, if you Zillion and you get the crystal off the cat, and then you double time bomb immediately after the first shuffle, you're just like, oh wow, this Zillion's the best champion ever. Or the opponent's like, I'm Ramp and I don't care about time bombs, and that's a problem, right? It's like what ends up someone goes over your head. It's very problematic for the time bomb printer to essentially win those matchups, and of course with Eddie being everywhere, every deck is going to go over your head. So that's a problem. Finally, we have summon effects only. So that's stuff like Morgana and Mordekaiser. What I mean by summon effects only is that they typically, it's not a tier per se, it just means that like I can't, it's hard to review them as champions when they essentially do one thing in every single deck they're in. It's basically Morgana comes down and shackles a thing and then chumps for a little bit of lifesteal, and then you use Morgana's Dark Binding to stun things and then curse things and that sort of, you know. But her actual level up is kind of meh. Like, compared to the power level of certain other champions, it's fine if you level Morgana. Like, she can swing for lethal in certain situations, which is cute, but mostly it's just the play effect. So again, I know that she's a top tier card, but I'm just saying, like, it's basically summon effect only. Mordekaiser's in the exact same camp. He's basically a summon effect only card. Right, so again, leveling him, his level up is so bad it's almost laughable, where he's basically just a vanilla follower that has this effect in Eternal. So his level up is terrible. So again, his level up could use a rework for sure, because otherwise he's just like play effect only, and you're like duplicating Stinky Dragon, or just like Death Rattle effects or whatever. But yeah, his level, the fact that he doesn't level means that he's summon effect only. Similar things with like Janna. Janna basically never gets leveled, so she's play effect only, where you just updraft two things. Like Janna and Mordekaiser are very similar, where it's just like you updraft two things with Janna, so it's play effect only, and then you chump out with the body, and then with Mordekaiser you sack two things and reprint them, and then you drag things with his big body. So they're very similar cards, both with level ups that do not matter. Summon effect only, I also include Vayne. Vayne's not terrible. If you want to play like Vayne, Vayne Rumble, or you could play like Vayne Ornn. I've messed around with that before. Vayne's not terrible, but again, it is just like play effect only in the sense that you get the tumble, and then leveling Vayne really doesn't matter. It's very rare you'll see a Vayne level, unless you're really going all in with her kit. Then we have Yuumi. So Yuumi is play effect only, which is like the definition of an attach card. You attach Yuumi, and that's what you do. That's her play effect. She attaches to a thing, and then she makes it bigger and grow over turn over turn. And then if you do manage to swing 3 times with her, then she grants things Spell Shield, and otherwise is the exact same. But yeah, so play effect only Yuumi. And then we have the new Ionia card. Unfortunately, I consider her to be much in the exact same camp, where like Lilia comes down and she gives you the Dream Laden Bow, and that's why you play Lilia. And then when you strike, you get more Dream Laden Bows. Laden Bows. So like again, it is a play effect only card, and unlike something like Vayne, where you can see the very obvious applications and power of a play effect only card, or Morgana and things like that, Lilia, the applications are a little less obvious. People have struggled with Lilia in the Eternal format. I'm no different. So again, everything else that we have not covered, and this video is getting a little long, is essentially in the Why Bother tier. Things like Anivia, Bard, oh geez, there's so many. Yeah, Anivia on 6, right? Everyone knows Anivia. Not the most competitive card in the world. On 2, we have Ahiri, right? So Ahiri, again, not the most competitive card in the world. On 8, we have, again, sorry, just flying through these bottom tiers, because again, I shouldn't have to explain them. Tryndamere, again, Tryndamere is a really cool card. They actually changed him, so he has Fearsome, so they've made an effort to buff all of the vanilla cards, but it just happens that Tryndamere is kind of the worst of the bunch. Then we have, again, Bard. So Bard's the worst Runeterra champion, unfortunately. I like Bard a lot, though. And that basically just has to do with, like, Chimes not really directly helping in any sense. Again, this is another Eddie thing, right? Where it's just like, okay, well, if Bard is the champion that is supposed to make the biggest of things, why are Eddie decks bigger? And so again, Bard just has to sit in the bottom of the tier until Eddie goes away. And on 7, On 7 we have Malphite. So Malphite's really cool just because he has, you know, again, he's basically got Unstoppable Force when he levels, and Unstoppable Force is very good because it stuns an entire board. But, you know, again, it's not that powerful. You can try to combine it with Yasuo. So if you want to play like Steel Gale, Yasuo, Malphite, like I think that's probably fine. But generally speaking, that is the Yasuo carry and not the Malphite carry. Healing, we have Soraka. So again, I mentioned this before with Tahm Kench being the better part of the two. You're never playing Soraka without Tahm Kench, and that's problematic because all she does is basically draw you a card. Nami. So again, personal thing. I believe Nami was nerfed, and that makes it very, very hard. They actually changed her level up condition entirely. So you played 5+ spells with an allied Nami in play, as opposed to you've attuned a certain number of times. So Nami used to be toxic, where like you would just attune a bunch and then play her leveled, and then there was, you know, she would just go off, and it was very uninteractive. So they changed it so you have to play 5+ spells with an allied Nami in play. It turns out that that's kind of challenging. So for that reason, she stays pretty low tier. Then we got the Angel. So we are talking about Empower. So Kayla. The Empower archetype just isn't great. You'll never see the Kayla flip. And it's a shame because Kayla is like a cool, well-designed, well, like at least the artistic design of the champion is very interesting. Her being like a big angel lady. But again, Empower 16 is a lot. It's a big ask. So she's pretty low tier. And yeah. Then we have the likes of Tristana. Again, I think I talked about this before, where there's just like not a lot of Tristana stuff going on. Then we have Master Yi and Ionia on 2. Again, no such thing as a good Master Yi deck currently, which sucks because I love Master Yi. He was always my favorite card, or my favorite champion from League of Legends, just because he's so simple in what he does. And then Senna. So again, Senna was hard nerfed, so you she wouldn't be toxic anymore, and then now you just don't get, similar to Nami, like you just don't play Kaisa anymore. They're just better cards at doing what she does. So again, that was all of the champions in LOR. You might disagree with some of the rankings, but again, I think I did my best to try to justify all of them. But got some gameplay for you as well, if you're more interested in that. But this is the end of the tier list. This is Eternal King, signing out.